Hi, I'm Jeff Davis, and I'm happy to report the skies are blue, the fires are distinguished, and people are getting back out on the wine road. Why don't you come along with us? It's been a rough couple of weeks here in Northern California, but wine country is open and we're welcoming visitors. And the place I'm visiting today always gets plenty of them. South of the town of Sonoma, on the southern end of Sonoma Valley, is a wide open plain with farmland, vineyards, and the flat and wetlands of San Pablo Bay. Nestled back against the tip of Sonoma Mountains in the midst of unexpected lush surroundings is Cline Cellars. The grounds offer a number of outdoor areas along meandering paths that offer places to escape the crowds who come from across the U.S. to enjoy some of their favorite wine. The property offers other surprises as well. There's quite a bit of history there. And for 15 years, the director of winemaking, Tsegeletos, has been crafting a great number of varietals back behind the oasis. I reached out to Charlie in the midst of harvest, but he managed to make some time for me. Charlie comes from a Greek-Italian family, and as I've often heard from winemakers of that heritage, as they were growing up, wine was always part of dinner.
There was always wine on the table. Yeah, we always had something on the table, and it was mostly wine.
You've been a NorCal guy for a long time. Huh?
Yeah, born and raised in Northern California. I was born in Mill Valley, then we lived in San Anselmo for a few years through high school, and then I went off to Davis, and then settled back here in Sonoma. So I've been here for over 30 years.
I read also that your great-grandfather made wine in the 30s in Guerneville. And I imagine back then the Russian River was probably pretty clean, wasn't it?
Yeah, I imagine it was. You know, he did make wine up there. We actually went looking for his winery one time, and it was somehow connected to Corbel, or it had become a storage shed or something since then, so we never really did find it, but that is a story.
A large enough operation that he actually had a structure, huh?
Yeah, I think so. I believe so, yeah.
So, yeah, you mentioned UC Davis. You went there in, like 79, but you studied agriculture science and plant science.
I did. I studied ag science and plant science, and I graduated there in 79, and after Davis, my first job in the wine business was as an apprentice winemaker down in San Jose at a little winery called Pendleton Winery.
And you learned enough with the ag science that you could make wine as well?
You know, it was a good enough basis that it got my foot in the door, and it gave me an opportunity to get to know some winemakers that had some experience. So I'd say as far as education goes, it has been the opportunity to work with different winemakers at different wineries over the years where I really, learned how to make wine and got to see what their toolbox was all about and try things for myself and ask all those questions you asked. Does this really work? And you experiment with it and just go from there.
And you go, yuck, that didn't work.
That did not work. That did not work. Or, hey, that really does work. Or, I don't know if I quite believe that story. And then you try that out. Yeah.
I saw Hacienda Wine Cellars, D'Agostini Winery, and Glen Ellen Winery also part of your background.
They are. They have been. When I look at, I've been with Cline now for 15 years with Cline Cellars and Jacuzzi Family Winery, and before that I was with Glen Ellen for 15 years. So those last two jobs were 30 years.
And in that case, I'm sure you learned quite a bit because in that period you can certainly try different things.
Oh yeah, no, it was a wonderful learning experience. It's given me the chance over the years to work literally with dozens of winemakers, old-timers, old folks that have been making wine for 50 and 60 years, and then new young guys too, right out of the university.
And you almost have to stay at a place a long time, because I love hearing the story about how, and the fact that when you're planning ahead, you're not planning for next year or the year after. You're talking 10 years or 20 years.
Yeah, the grapes, you've got to have those things in the ground at least 3 or 4 years before you really start getting a crop off of those things. So you're certainly looking forward that far. And plus, you have to get to know these grapes. So when I first signed on, for instance, at Cline, there are all sorts of new and interesting grapes to me, things like Mourvedre and Carignan, and it takes a couple of years to really get to know these different vineyards. And is that block going to give me really ripe flavors? Does this one want to be pulled off early? It just takes some time.
And then you hit your stride.
That's right. And then you learn the equipment, and you learn the people you're working with. But also, importantly, you learn the marketplace and what your folks want to sell and where you're best suited to sell those wines.
Were you making Mourvedre when you first started here? Is it that long ago?
The first time I made Mourvedre was when I joined Cline Cellars 15 years ago. But Fred Cline, one of his, he founded the winery in the early 80s, and he actually moved as a teenager from Southern California to to Oakley, California, to live on his grandmother and grandfather's ranch. And he did that as a teenager, and he learned to make wine as a teenager. And he was making wine out of those Mourvedres and Carignans and Zinfandels that were planted in the early 1900s when he was just a kid. And we still make wine out of those same grapes, out of the same sort of heritage grapes that are, they're unique and they're planted on their own rootstock. Yeah. They're in those deep sandy soils, kind of in the southern, just south of the Sacramento Delta there, and they're treasures. And I don't know if you've ever been out there, Jeff, but you go to Oakley and you see this vineyard planted in 1904, 1906, and it's surrounded by a housing complex. So they're just like little pockets, little treasures. That is, one farmer said, "Hey, you can make a lot more money planting houses than you can grapes." But Fred Cline has kind of made a real effort to preserve some of these vineyards, and that's what we're all about with our heritage blends.
It's good to hear, and I know the Historical Vineyard Society does a lot with making sure that a lot of these old vineyards remain.
Sure they do. Zinfandel. There's a Zinfandel society that looks at all of those old vines, and they just really are treasures. But you can come into our tasting room and pick up a bottle of that Mourvedre and try it for yourself.
Right. And I would be remiss if I did not mention the fact that my mother-in-law, Sally, is a big fan of your Mourvedre.
Sure. I love that wine, too. It's big. The grapes in Contra Costa County in Oakley, they ripen up. There's plenty of heat out there, right? And there's not a lot of rain, so you get a real concentration in those berries. And if you taste this Cline Ancient Vine Mourvedre, to me, it's just cherries and chocolate, but a real mouth-filling wine. In fact, we tell people, because it's hard to remember Mourvedre. I mean, how many people know Mourvedre? It's been blended in a number of different countries. But out in America, as a standalone Mourvedre, we tell people to remember Move Over Dear. So if they can remember, I want a glass of that Move Over Dear, then they'll go find it. Otherwise, it's just forget it.
You also make Burgundian and Bordeaux varieties as well as the Zinfandel.
We do. When Fred Cline, he started his winery in Oakley there, but then he moved the operation. He found this piece of property in Carneros, in the southern end of Carneros, and he bought this in the late 80s and began planting grapes here. And here we've got grapes that do really well in cool climates, because not all grapes like heat. I mean, Zinfandel, Cabernet, Mourvedre, Carignan, they love heat, but then you get things like Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and Syrah and Merlot that don't require as much heat to ripen up, and they do better being grown in cooler regions. They preserve more of those delicate flavors. So that's what we have planted here in Carneros, and that's where the winery is right now. We're about 45 minutes north of San Francisco. Yeah.
Which variety do you find the most pleasing to work with?
That's a tough question because we work with so many of them. As long as we can produce a nice, balanced wine, they've all got something. Whether you're talking about the 100 cases of Gewürztraminer we produce for the tasting room alone, or that nice, Mourvedre program, or Viognier is a ball too when you get that right, those fresh apricots and, apple characters there. But, we make Chardonnay and Pinot Noir too. So if I had to pick one, I'd say it's going to be one of the unusual ones that blows people away when they get a chance to taste it. So it would be Mourvedre or even Carignan. We make a 100% Carignan blend that's typically blended out, but our vines are 100 years old, and those things are like plum, this wonderful plum and tobacco. I know it sounds like a funny combo, but it's another mouth-filling, really fun ancient vine wine.
And surely the yields are low on those old vines, right?
They're very low. In fact, there's one, we make something we call small berry Mourvedre, and it's a real limited quantity, and it is, if we get a ton per acre, I'd be amazed. So some of those, that is the drawback to having those old vines in the deep sandy soil. They're not irrigated, they're dry farmed, there's not a lot of nutrients in the sand, they're not getting a lot of water, but they sure know how to ripen their fruit, but they're not big yields. They're maybe 2 tons if we're doing well.
And speaking of their varieties, I mentioned earlier, Charlie is also the winemaker at Jacuzzi Family Vineyards. We'll touch upon that and talk about the relaxing Cline Cellars property when On the Wine Road continues. I'm at Cline Cellars in South Sonoma's Carneros region talking with their Director of Winemaking, Charlie Tsegeletos. We were discussing Cline's different varietals, but Charlie also has a hand in the winemaking at Jacuzzi Family Vineyards, which is just across the street. They offer a good list of Italian varietals, which I assumed certainly must be fun to work with.
We do, and it is fun because we discover those along, when we were building up that brand, and that is Fred's grandparents that he went to live with in Oakley, California. They're part of that Jacuzzi family, one of the 7 brothers and 6 sisters that immigrated from Italy. And so the focus over there is, while we do a number of our estate grapes like Merlot go into production over there, and Chardonnay, and there's Pinot Noir too, we get to search around for these exotic and fun Italian grapes like Ionico and Aleatico and Sagrantino and Nero d'Avola and a whole host of things that most people haven't seen because there's just a handful of those acres in California. Right. But it's given us a chance to drive around California, and some of these growers I knew from past lives, different wineries and things. But we managed to secure these top quality Italian grape varieties and sort of make them in our own style, with the California sun helping us out. So come visit Jacuzzi Winery.
Yeah, you'd almost think you're at Tuscany over there or someplace.
Really.
With this bright sun and
it's funny. I mean, it's a wonderful place to tour, but it was built to resemble Fred Cline's great-grandparents' house in Casarsa, Italy, in northern Italy there. And in fact, they had to go, I believe they went to Oklahoma to quarry the bricks because they looked a lot like the Italian bricks. And then the courtyard actually is cobblestones made of Italian bricks. And then there's an 80-year-old fig tree that he actually scooped up from the little farmhouse in Oakley where he spent his childhood with his grandparents and replanted it in our backyard. So there's a lot of history in these places. Really kind of neat.
Is it easy to scoop up a 80-year-old tree?
It is not easy to scoop up an 80-year-old tree. I think it took a lot of backhoe work, and now it's still, I wouldn't say it's the healthiest fig tree in the world, but the suckers are real healthy. But we've got to go over there and take a look.
So I know that you're spread across the country. How many, just for Cline, let's say, what's the production like here?
For a family winery, I'd say we're pretty good size. But in the grand scheme of things, when you compare us to some of the bigger wineries, we're not that big. So without giving you a number, I'd say, heck, most of our production, with the exception of our Ancient Vine Zinfandel and our Lodi Zinfandel, most of the programs are under 10,000 cases. Oftentimes they're under 1,000 cases. So all of our single vineyard Zinfandels are 500 to 1,000 cases, that kind of thing.
Why don't you, since we're talking about the different varieties, tell me about the different tiers you have and the different labels.
Okay, well, with Cline Cellars, the one that you're most likely to see out there on the store shelf is either our Lodi Zinfandel, which we call our Old Vine Zinfandel, and has got a beautiful new black label we've just redesigned. And then we have an Ancient Vine series of wines, and that's our Zinfandel, our Carignan, and our Mourvedre. And it's great fun to taste all 3 of those because they're all blockbusters flavor-wise, and they're all under $20 too. And then we have what we call our California series of wines, where it's a real affordable North Coast Viognier that sells for $11 or $12 a bottle. And it's got all that apricot character to it. Then we have a California Syrah, where it's a Sonoma County Syrah, but it's all our estate fruit. It's all our Sonoma Coast Syrah, and that's just a lovely savory thing. And it's also really reasonably priced. I mean, I might point out that we sell things, we price it so that they actually move. So you're not coming here for a $100 bottle of wine. You're coming here for a great value. Right. And it could be anywhere from $10 to $20 a bottle. And I think that's part of our success. That's why the vintages are all fresh and they just keep moving too.
Well, and as you indicated, though, they're still full of flavor. I mean, these are world-class wines for sure.
No, they're amazing. And I mean, to be able to find a wine like this that's actually on its own rootstock and not planted on a resistant rootstock, where you get the vine struggles even a bit more, and there just aren't that many of them out there, makes the whole thing kind of fun, too. But you asked, we do have another program called Farmhouse, and you'll start seeing Farmhouse Red and Farmhouse White out there. It's a real simple label, but they're both, the white blend is neat. It's like a Muscat Canelli and a Viognier and a little Chardonnay blended in there. And then the Farmhouse Red is everything from Merlot to Zinfandel to Barbera. It's just a collection of different things, and they're nice.
You winemakers are so fortunate here in the U.S. to have the ability to just add whatever you want into a blend, because there are many places in the world you can't do that.
Yeah, no, I think we're really lucky to be California winemakers, or American winemakers for that matter. Because like you said, you could be in a number of European countries where you'd be really limited at what you could do. I mean, you might not even be able to plant the variety you want in that area. It might not be an approved variety. So where it's just anything you want to try over here, I'm really pleased to be able to do that.
At least the Italians came up with the Super Tuscan.
That's right. They did come up. They let that little Cabernet slip in there, huh? Yeah, they were Super Tuscan and all. Yeah, and I think to their benefit too. I think it made a bigger, fatter wine.
Tell us about the green string method of farming that Fred Cline helped adopt.
He did. Well, we have something we call a green string institute, and then a green string fruit stand in Petaluma there, and it's all organically farmed, no pesticides, no herbicides used in growing all this stuff. But I think the idea with the green string is it just ties in all the living things. What you do to the soil is going to be reflected in what happens to the plant that you're going to eat, that things are going to run off into the water system. I think we're all tied in together. So we try and do the right things for the land. So we are farming, even though we're not certified organic, we're farming using organic methods. For instance, we're grinding up cinder cones as mineral additives to the grapes here. We're composting. We're using sheep to do the weed eating, or the winery is solar powered. I feel good about letting my dog swim in the ponds here. Everything feels pretty good, and the soil's nice and healthy.
Speaking of the pond, it's a great time to get into the story about the carp. When you told me that on the phone, I couldn't believe it.
No, it's crazy. A fellow by the name of Julius Poppe bought this property in 1851. California became a state in 1850. He bought 1,000 acres from Mariano Vallejo, and he had at one time, Poppe had like a super successful cigar shop. So he was an entrepreneurial spirit. He imported from Holstein, Germany, these German/European carp because they were hugely popular as a food source. It's like the most eaten fish in the world. And he began breeding them. He bought 85 of them. Just a handful of them survived the trip from Holstein, Germany to our ponds here at Cline. And so starting with like 5 or under fish, he started breeding these things. And then in, I think it was early 1880s, the Bureau of Fisheries distributed his fish, like 260,000 of these carp all over America. So the ancestors of the first carp to be introduced into America, the first German and European carp, are from our ponds. That's just a crazy story. And you can come out here and feed them. In fact, they wanted us to feed them. They did. We walked right by them, and they were saying, please feed me.
Yes. Yeah, they're still in your pond to this day.
They're in the pond to this day. And the kids, because we get a lot of visitors, and they bring their children here, too. And we have wild bird cots where they can see different pheasants and things. But the kids love to feed those things. Oh, yeah. And then also we have, every fourth grader in California has to do a bit of a history project, and oftentimes it involves building a mission model, a model of one of the 21 missions in California. Since the last mission was dedicated on this property in 1823, Nancy Cline was offered an opportunity to buy one of the models that was built for the world's exhibition in Treasure Island in 1939. She bought the entire collection. So you can see every one of these 21 missions that were built by 20 German cabinet makers and a couple of Italian architects that were built for that 1939 event. They're all here. We get thousands of fourth graders here every year. Wow. People book. We get school buses in here all the time. It's just fun. And we make wine.
And you have an old Pullman railroad car parked in back.
And we have a 1920s Pullman railroad car parked in back, too. Yeah, with its own kitchen and its and a bathroom and everything. But no, it's parked out there.
What are you using for that?
That, we'll have weddings here from time to time, and it can be used as a meeting room or a place to change in, but it's not used for much.
Well, every time I come here, I forget how lush it is here in this little corner of Carneros, because there's plenty of places in Carneros where you look out and all you see is just open land, But here, all kinds of eucalyptus trees, and I'm sure many others, huge bushes, palm trees.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. It is a little oasis here. And before I applied for a job, I didn't know about this place. But you turn in through our archway, through our metal archway there, and then you tuck yourself back in. And we don't do a lot of advertising, if any, but people have kind of discovered us. So on the weekends, this place does a heck of a business. But it's really fun to taste here, too, and walk around, feed the fish. It's a popular spot.
And nice spaces where people can kind of get away from the crowd. You have some tables and chairs and picnic benches around the entire property.
We've made an effort to create different little areas where people can go to, and in fact, you can if you want to come with your family and have a picnic or something, we'll rent those picnic tables. Because the demand is such that if you want to get it for an hour at a specific time or something, we'll put your name on the list and let you use the thing.
So, how long do you anticipate hanging around?
Well, you know what? I know I've got a couple more vintages in me. Yeah, that's always a tough call, huh?
Looks like you can do a lot more than that.
Yeah, I think so. I feel it's pretty good. It's pretty comfortable. They're very, very nice people. I enjoy who I'm working with, and these grapes are always a challenge and always fun. So, no, I'm here to stay.
I would think it'd be hard to move up from here. If you went anywhere, I would think it'd almost be a step down.
Right. Well, I've worked for big wineries, big corporate operations and things. And I got to say, a little family-owned operation with interesting grapes is pretty good. Yeah, especially since we've invested in the right kind of equipment, and I think we're doing things right. So it really is fun.
He's Charlie Tsegeletos of Cline Cellars. And if that doesn't keep him busy enough, he makes wine at Jacuzzi Family Vineyards, which is conveniently located across the street. By the way, congratulations to Charlie and his team for picking up a Best of Class award for their Sonoma Coast Merlot, a gold as well, and a gold for their Sonoma Coast Pinot Gris during this year's Sonoma County Harvest Fair Awards. Thanks to Charlie for taking time out of his busy harvest season, and continued success to the Cline family. If you're listening to this on iTunes or another podcast provider, you can learn more about my show at onthewineroad.com and on Facebook as well. I'm on Instagram under the name JD Wine Road and on Twitter at JD Wine Road. I'm Jeff Davis. Thanks for listening to this podcast of On the Wine Road.